Okay. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to some of you out there. My name is Wes OKK, and I'm the CEO of Headway Idea Labs. And today, I, it is my honor to have Darja on. Darja and I are going to go through a webinar today or present a webinar called Building Investor Networks That Actually Fund Startups. And Darja is from Delam. And I'm going to let Darja do a little bit of her intro, and then I will start, and then we'll go from there. But thank you again for joining us. Thank you again for those that will be listening to the recording, for taking the time out of your day to hear what we have to say. Go ahead, Darja, if you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely. Hello, everybody. I do hope you enjoy our webinar today. I'm sure I'm excited. I am Daria. I've been working with Dealim for the past 3 years. Dealim is an investment management platform for early stage investors. That means that we have a few different investors on the platform. We have also a lot of individual investors, and we basically facilitate the process, the selection process for investors, which means we also have a lot of founders on the platform. And this is actually what is my responsibility within the team. I do business development, but I also keep founder focus, trying to make founders' lives better and easier, those who are using Dealum, not only. But I have been in the startup ecosystem for almost a decade now, which is very hard to believe because it feels like I joined about 2 years ago. I've been with Europe's largest accelerator. It wasn't the case when I joined. We were doing 2 programs a year, and then we scaled to doing 12 programs a year. We have been also at the time named Best Accelerator, European Accelerator. And actually, fun fact, I started my startup journey not knowing what is a startup, just joined the company. And now they are one of unicorns, Estonian unicorns, of which we have 8, as me and Wes just discussed. So I do have, if I say so myself, quite deep knowledge of the startup side, but also investor side, as I have been doing it for many, many years. And I also know how to build programs and networks that actually fund companies, what is good and what might need be improved. This is me. Thank you, and thank you everyone for joining.
Thank you for that introduction, Darja. Um, More for us to talk about tomorrow when we do our podcast. That was a really good background. Similar to Darja, I entered the entrepreneurship ecosystem with working with startups about 13 years ago. My background is not only in the tech side, I'm an electrical engineer, but I went into the business development, marketing and sales side about 25, 30 years ago. And during that journey in during corporate working for corporate companies, I learned how to launch products. And at that time, I started mentoring postdocs who had developed new IP and they were trying to find a way to commercialize. About 13, 14 years ago, actually in 2012, I started putting together a program which we now call Headway Idea Labs, our investor readiness curriculum, which helps accelerators. We target accelerators. Even though I've worked with hundreds of startups, we pivoted several years ago to start working with accelerators because we saw the challenges that startups were running into after going through an accelerator program. And so our investor readiness series offers 3 different types of programs. One is a and a pre-accelerator program helps startups get ready for an accelerator program. But it also helps the accelerator uh, bring in a pipeline of startups that are probably better suited and more prepared to go through an accelerated program. Then we have our core investor readiness series. And then at the end, we have what we call our post accelerator, just because very few startups actually get funded after they go through an accelerator program, but they're ready. Some are already some get funded, some are have the tools and the educational part to be able to grow their business. But we have seen, well, what I've seen and my team has seen, because I've worked with multiple accelerators over the years, is that many of the startups tend to uh, not make it to that stage of raising capital. And it's Headway's goal to not only equip startups, but more so equip accelerators so that they have a much higher success rate with their startups um, getting funded. Now, the post accelerator program is also a lot of accelerators have expressed having a continuous connection to their startups after they leave the program. And accelerator programs, just if you're a startup on this call, accelerator programs and accelerator teams, they can attest that it is a challenging job to work with multiple startups all at the same time, different personalities, different stages, and a lot of times different business models and sometimes different industries. And so it's very difficult to start another program shortly after you just finished one and try to stay in touch with the previous startups that were in your previous program. So Headway's Post Accelerator program is set up to do that, just that, so that the accelerators can have some connection 6 months to a year after the startups have left the particular program they were in. So that's a little bit about myself and Headway and Darja as well. So I'm going to run through some slides that just talks about building investor networks for accelerators and some of the challenges startups go through and accelerators go through. And Darja, please feel free to jump in if you have any comments or suggestions
Mhm.
whatsoever. So, building investor networks for accelerators, helping founders become investable is the key thing. That's what typically accelerators are focusing on. And if it's not funded, it's a place where founders can come in to figure out what is my next path. What are some of the strategic components that I need to implement in order to grow and scale. But also helping investors discover better companies. Now, since 2018, I've worked intimately with a ton of investors, both on the VC side and AC side. So these are investors that I have one-on-one meetings with to better understand the criteria, to better understand what they're looking for before they invest in a startup. And so I've had hundreds of meetings with investors and then meetings with investors and startups. And most of these meetings, even though many of them were helping the startup get funded. Most of the meetings were just listening to the investor, taking down notes, asking specific questions on what they're looking for. And I'll tell you this, investors are desperately looking for companies to invest in. That is a very true statement. One of Headway's advisors, who's on our team, who I speak to about every week, he is a partner in $1 billion fund, the most prominent investment group here in Houston, and he travels a lot. He travels 3 weeks a month looking and searching for startups because even though there are tens of thousands of startups out there, they're not always easily funded, and there's some things we'll talk about through that. But also helping accelerators produce measurable funding outcomes. This is what Headway and Dealum are all about. And Darja, just so you know, I appreciate our relationship with Dealum. We signed on earlier this year, but Headway and myself had a lot of uh, conversations with Dealum in 2023, 2022, 2023, and we were ready earlier this year for many, many different reasons. We had relaunched our business model. Now, why does this
Well,
matter? Go ahead.
no,
You're
we
going
are
to say
happy to have you. And I think
okay.
this is also true about using Delum. If you just start, you don't really need the whole setup because we have developed quite a comprehensive solution. But then you reach the point when you need to optimize and automate, and this is when we come in.
Yes, very, very true. Yesterday, when you, or a couple days ago, you and I were talking about the percentages there. But as I mentioned in previous slide, accelerators continue graduating founders, investors continue looking for quality deals, yet relatively few startups successfully raise capital. Isn't that true, Darla? Darja, sorry.
Uh, it's okay. It is absolutely true. I think we all know that about 9 out of 10 startups die, and that means they either didn't have the good enough idea that would take them to the next stage, or they just couldn't make it work. And according to my knowledge and my personal experience, I've worked with Accelerator. I've done actually scouting for them, being the person looking out there, trying to find the best startups we can take into the program. And currently, I'm also working with one of the angel groups. Acceptance rate or investment rate for startups out of the whole pipeline that investors get is about 1%. So if you do 10,000 startups a year, you receive applications, then you do about 10. No, my math is not good. I have Excel for that. But the acceptance rate is 1%, and you need to be outstanding uh, to actually get the money. And also, if you go for Accelerator, you do have a better chance of getting an investment because it's not only about the idea, it's also about how you present it. And accelerators can teach you the rules of the game, and then you have a better chance of raising funds. But again, it's not guaranteed. Otherwise, everyone would go for Accelerator and everyone would get funded.
Very, very, very true. And thank you for that, Darja. As I mentioned, the problem isn't a lack of startups. The problem is the gap between the startups and getting capital. So acceleration, as from an accelerator, as Darja mentioned, and then this is, and you can always reach out to me if you have more questions on why my brain is thinking this way. But I look at the acceleration piece, and then I look at the investor readiness piece. Some accelerators actually include the investor readiness piece as part of their program, but many don't, from what I've seen. And so, in in Texas, predominantly, and a few other major cities, I've seen multiple startups go through an accelerator, then they go through another one, then they go through another one, and they haven't really hit this stage of investor readiness, and they haven't because of that they haven't received capital. So today's discussion is why startups struggle to raise capital. We've gotten a brief intro into DLM, and we'll have a lot more to talk about in regards to DLM. What investors actually need, building an investor network, creating repeatable funding outcomes, and then technology that supports investor engagement, which we have Darja and DLM here for that, and then some Q&A. Now, why startups don't raise? Um, a lot of people think I need a better pitch deck, and this is what we see and what I see at demo days. And the pitch decks are, in the most times, pitch decks are just beautiful. They're gorgeous. But that's not usually the issue. What investors are looking for are clear milestones, capital strategy, market understanding, founder maturity. Yes, who the founders are and their maturity, not just as people, but understanding the business and the strategic mindset they need to have is very, very key. In fact, this is probably one of the most key components for an investor to say yes or no. Risk reduction. How have they mitigated risk? Because every business, every action, almost every action in a business decision, there's a risk. And how have the founders and their team mitigated those risks? And then execution discipline. Are they actually able to execute? Are they currently executing what they said they would execute based on their milestones and based on what the market has determined? Now, the deck simply communicates those things, right? But you actually have to be able to execute on those things. So, some of the missing layers that we have seen, most accelerators provide mentors, which is excellent and very much needed. Headway is supporting an accelerator program right now with a company called Cubio Innovation Hub here in Houston. And we have a great deal of mentors. most accelerators provide workshops and then demo day, but founders often leave without fundraising strategy. And you might get some really good tips on how to raise funding, but there's always, as I mentioned on the previous slide, there are a lot more details that are involved regarding the strategic side. Not necessarily here's something you need to do, it's understanding the strategic side behind how to do it. Milestone planning, as I mentioned, investor process, and then capital roadmap. What does that roadmap look like? And having a strategy. And this is where I feel really good about what Dealam provides is that how can I set up that roadmap to actually raise funds? What does that look like? And Dealam, in my opinion, not only provides a platform, but also some of the strategic components you need to have. But at the end of the day, you still have to do the work. I struggle when startups say, "Hey, I put uh, my deck out on the platform, and now I'm just waiting for investors to come in and go, yes, we're going to fund you," and that's not the case. That's like going to an event and saying you want to go find someone to get married and think that wow, people are just going to rush to you and go, I want to marry you or I want to date you. You know, it's not. It's I always say this to startups. It's a matchmaking. It's really a matchmaking situation between an investor and a startup, and that relationship must take place. In all my sessions, I talk about it's still human being to human being, even though it's all about business. And we need to make sure as startups and as accelerators, we're doing that job. Now, Headways, this is our seed conversion network and framework, and I'm not going to jump into it too much, but investor readiness, strategic clarity must take place, milestone planning, investor confidence, and then capital. And this is our framework that we help provide to accelerators so they can implement this with their startups. Now, some of our previous results over the past 12 years, I've worked with 500 plus startups I've influenced, and that not all of them have come into our program. So the ones that have gone through some versions of our program, we've seen 80% of them get funded. The check sizes are a little bit smaller, 150 to a million plus. We've had one that raised $3 million. And those that the 60% of them have completed this. Some did not need to complete all of this. They had smaller versions of it, but everyone that has gone through a part of what we have provided, 80% of them have been able to raise funds. Most recent cohort last year, 33% of them were funded within 60 days. And right now they've had, and the others have had 67% of those have had active investor discussions. And it's still a lot of work. Those that haven't been funded that came out of that the cohort that we did last year, there are things that they need to work on in regards to mitigating risk for the investors to believe that they are ready. But the cool thing about it, the investors have reached out to me and said, "Hey, Wes, or my team, I'm very interested in these startups. Can you send me more information?" They love the information, but where things tend to not go super well is in the conversations with the startups. And not that the startups say anything bad, is the startups need to be on point on some of those things that I mentioned earlier, because the investors are able to pick it out and go, founder maturity in regards to not just as a person, but in regards to business strategy is missing. And so this money, I always tell startups, this money's not free. And so it's not a loan. And so the risks that the investors are taking in investing money in you, and you really have to be on point. So investors need more than great ideas, right? Can the team execute? Can they survive setbacks? Can they hit milestones? Do they understand capital efficiency? Can they communicate risk? Can they build trust? All these are very, very important. And to build trust takes time. It takes time with having interactions with the investors as a startup. Now, I have a really great person on here. I'm not going to embarrass her or ask her to speak, but Victoria Bude, if you guys see her on there, she does a lot of our investor outreach and she's building these relationships. She's done a really good job. on Dealim, and she's onboarded 16 plus angel investors from Dealim. And then I have somebody else on here. Well, they're not on here right now. We brought in about 16 VCs, and that wasn't through Dealim, but that was through our personal relationship. And I've met with each one of those VCs over the past 3 months. And so actually we've gotten another four in the past month and a half. But it's building trust with these investors, and also building investor confidence, which is very, very, very important. So great founders still need access. And so some of the things we're going to go through is investor readiness isn't enough, just so you know, even though I talk a lot about investor readiness to accelerators and to startups, but primarily to accelerators, founders also need the right investors. They need the right timing. They need the right introductions, and they need the right technology. Now, and they need to do the work. And this is why I'm excited about bringing on Dealam. So meet Dealam, and I'm going to have you take it from here, Darja, if you don't mind, and I will just switch the slides as we go along.
Mhm. Thank you so much for the introduction of what you're doing. I think this is something that gets overlooked a lot. That first of all, funding is you need to work for it. At least each founder who fundraises, they usually, well, those who actually successfully fundraise, they start with building a pipeline of, let's say, 400 investors, and then when they reach the end of that pipeline, it's one or two or three that actually fund them. So you need to hear a lot of no's until you get to a yes. And sometimes, even though you've done all the right things, you still get only no's, because life is unfair, or you haven't went through program that actually explain to you how to do it in the proper way. Or maybe your startup is not actually a startup. Maybe you can be a successful business but not be the venture case, which is an also interesting thing to discuss, but I will not delve into that topic. But what is important in fundraising, and what you have mentioned, is network and relationships, because at the end of the day you talk to people, and building trust with investors is very important. And this is why when you start fundraising, you need to start fundraising before you actually need to fundraise. You need to start meeting investors, you need to start talking to them, and you always need to remember that they are actually remembering things, they are writing things down, and then across months, if not years, they will be tracking your progress, and they will know that you're growing or something is not working. They do have notes, they do remember, or they use Dealum and they write comments in there. But you need to start working on your fundraise before you actually need to fundraise. You need to start building relationships. And then when you actually need money, you just do a few calls, ideally, and then you get the funds that you need. It's a huge preparation work, and Dealum can actually help you do it in a slightly easier way. We have built what we have built, and we are doing what we're doing to create a more connected ecosystem. So you can go through Accelerator, you go to then to the angels, either you find them on the platform, or like Quest, accelerators start building relationships with angels that they bring on board when their investors, when their startups are ready. And then we also work with VCs and universities. We do have not that many VCs, because we usually work with early stage startups, which means that's the sweet spot for accelerators and networks, but we do have VCs. We work with the universities. They either have business angel groups, those who have graduated, made a little bit of money. They create their own networks, and then they can use Dealum. Or there are university programs, same things as Wes and Headway Labs doing, but for those who are actually our students and who are building something, maybe something very technical or deep, then they can run the programs on DLOMS as well. Innovation hubs, startup programs. We also work with events because when you are fundraising, you go to a lot of different events, and then investors are actually looking at you. And to make this transaction much easier, we collect applications for events, and then investors can look. Also, they can add them the interesting startups to their deal rooms if they're using Dealum. So this is how we try to build this network where startups apply once, they update their applications, and then they can go through different steps, growing within the ecosystem, within their startup, going from investor to investor. And for startups, our value proposition is that you create one application and then you can submit it to as many investors as you find on Dealum. We do have a discovery feature where we match you to relevant investors, or if you are actually fundraising and you're pressing all of the apply buttons on all of the investors' web pages, sometimes you find Dealum there as well. And as we have been doing it for 9 years, we somehow found ourselves being used in 214 countries. It means that we have applications from so many countries, but we are also active with investors in Europe and US. Those are our two main markets, also UK, officially not Europe anymore, but we have a lot of angels and a few programs from UK as well. We have 270 investor groups, out of which they have their individual investors who are within the groups. And of those, we have 34,000. And I think it gets outdated every other month. But at the moment, we have 140 company profiles on Dealum. So this is in the nutshell what we're doing. If you need to ever think about Dealum, we're building a connected ecosystem for early stage fundraising. And actually, why we have built it is because our founders built a successful startup, exited it, and decided to become angels and understood that everything is run on Excel, and this is not the most efficient way to do it. And they have built something that they wanted to use themselves. So we saw the pain, and we built it. And
Awesome.
we're doing quite okay, I think. Uh, and as I mentioned, we work with accelerators, but I think the process of selection works pretty similar for all early stage and later stage, let's say seed round stage startups. You collect applications. This is what we do in Dilo. You have application link, startups fill in that one application that they can send to a lot of different investors. You can review startups. You can track their progress. They can report to you. You have all of the communications in Dealum as well. You can invite your friendly investors to review startups and their applications, either when you're selecting them or when they're graduating and you're hosting a demo day. You can build your network of investors who you are friendly with, and then you can share active deals, because startups don't start fundraising the moment they exit accelerators. Ideally, they would, and most of them do, but it doesn't mean that all of them are ready. And then when they tell you, okay, now we're fundraising, Wes and his team can put up the deal, and then friendly investors can review it, and then they can also invest. So this is how accelerators can support their graduated founders, just by building network and sharing it in the most efficient way they can. And we also do portfolio management for those accelerators and investors who actually invest, because not all of accelerators do invest their own capital. If you do, you can track portfolio, and then you can track different rounds as well. And then you can also have your vanity metrics saying that our portfolio and our founders have fundraised that much money, and then you sleep better at night because you've done such a good job. But because at the end of the day, we are people and results do motivate us. But at the same time, if you are investing and it's not, let's say, government money, but you actually have investors backing you, that will help you also to do the next fundraisers for your fund, because you can share your portfolio and they can see the metrics and how is it performing. And investor communication, investor communication. You can talk to investors as a startup when you have submitted applications, but also those who are on the platform and who are investors, they can communicate between themselves if they have created that relationship. And I think Wes is utilizing it quite a lot as well. This
Yes,
is
we
an,
also,
yeah,
sorry,
please.
go ahead. No, go ahead.
No,
Sorry.
no, go.
Yeah, we also, with the VCs, we also are able to share a startup to a VC straight from DLM's platform, whether the VC is
Mhm.
on there or not, which has been very, very beneficial. So for an accelerator, they can bring in all their startups on there, but still be able to share that non-confidential link, so to speak, because DLM has two parts to that, a
Mhm.
confidential part and a non-confidential. But that's been very, very helpful to just be able to send a VC a link and they get to see what they need to see.
Actually, startups have the same link. So if you are fundraising, you have deal and profile. You can share that link because it looks nice. It's basically your one pager that states what is the problem solution market. And if I'm not mistaken, there's also a public page tag. So instead of writing it all in the email, you can just share one link with investor, even if they're not using Dealum. So it works both ways. And I also came prepared. The next slide would be the little show and tell. If we do have accelerators, I think you need to restart my video because I did record it as a video because otherwise I will be talking here for the next 35 minutes, just explaining
Yes.
every single functionality.
So it does start and run on its own. You want me to start from the beginning again?
Well, yeah, because it was like third slide.
Okay.
It doesn't matter. I will start not from the very beginning, but basically here I wanted to point out that you can communicate with startups, but you also um, can have all of the history. You can do due diligence. Everyone can leave comments. That way, if someone goes on a vacation, no communication disappears into a locked-in box, and you have discussions. You have comments. And when you are doing your due diligence, everything is in the same place, and the whole team who works on selection is being able to see it. Also, you can review applications because you are also in charge. You're also in charge of what questions you ask from the startups, and then we format it so everything is in one place. At the same time, when you actually get to decisions, you can invite everyone to vote, be it your team or be it someone who is outside from the network. You can request reporting from startups. They don't have to be a portfolio startup because when you are selecting, they still can report the progress to you. You can do your portfolio maintenance and tracking. And this is the network feature where you can share as an investor, you can share with other investors in your network either some videos from demo days. You can also share open rounds, as you can see on the bottom. So we have thought through all of the things, and I'm just scratching the top of it. But basically, what we try to create is that you collect applications. They look like this. You evaluate them. We also have a little bit of AI in there, making the process easier. You communicate with startups and your team, and the whole process is streamlined. We have went in the second loop, so we can stop the video.
Okay.
Yeah. um, well, at Dealum, at least, as I am in charge of founders and trying to make their life easier and trying to nudge them to get better and understand the rules of the game. Because if you are an early stage startup, chances are at least half of them never fundraised. They just heard a word startup. They decided it's a cool idea and I have an idea and let's build it. But they don't actually know what they don't know and how to do it. We have a resource that I write is a newsletter. We have a help center where they can read how the deal actually works. But my favorite thing that I heard from one of our investors on the platform is that they receive feedback because they fine tune the questions in a way that when startups are answering the question, they realize the things they don't know, what they need to actually think through before presenting to investors. Because you know, the problem solution, maybe market, but you never thought about cap tables, how much
Hmm.
equity you're going to give away, what is your valuation, and all of those questions that usually are in the application form are the questions that investors need answers to before they make a decision to invest. And this is the founder development, at least that we're doing at the moment. We also do webinars. We do try to help as much as we can. Maybe you can share how you do support for the
Sure,
founders as well.
sure. So yeah, so our founder development is done through our either our pre-accelerator or post-accelerator. But as I mentioned, we like working through accelerators directly to help support their founders. And then that's what we do in the earlier part of Headway's investor readiness curriculum. And then we prep them for the what we call the core part of the investor readiness, which is either our core curriculum that accelerators use or it's the post. And then we move on to the tech, and that's all on the platform as well with worksheets, so accelerators can monitor the progress of the founder's development. And then when it comes to the investor side, this is where we move to DLM from a technology standpoint. And with DLM as a technology platform, you're able to build the investor relationships. And now you're able to get to that place of a higher probability of funding. And this is the core reason why Headway and DLM, I think, exist as collaborative partners. But if you wanted to add to that as well, Darsha, please feel free.
Uh, I would say it's this. I think you as a customer, when you understand why the DLM is built, this is the ideal way how to use DLM, and this is exactly why we have built it. And helping founders go through each and single step is very important. Considering my background, I did do exactly the same thing. We did have a pre-accelerator, we did have an accelerator, we did invest, we had the support program after they graduate. So everything you say resonates very well with me. And that was the core value proposition from the accelerator. So I think what you're doing is great. And someone definitely has to explain to founders how to talk to investors, what they're doing, why you're talking to investors, how you're talking to investors, and what they want to hear. Having technology to facilitate it is just an added bonus to make everyone's life easier, because for founders it's a super stressful process. You need to
Yeah.
talk to investors and you think that investors have all the power and you are just there begging for money. But as you said at the beginning of the webinar, investors desperately need to invest this money, especially those in venture capital. They have timelines, but they have a bunch of money that they need to invest. And if they don't invest, they have penalties. So investors need startups as much as startups need investors. Yes, one comes asking for money, another one says, no, I'm not going to invest. And it feels like the power dynamic is a bit off. But at the end of the day, you need to realize that it should be a collaborative process. And also, if you're taking money from investors, my piece of advice is to realize if you are at early stages, that means that that particular person would be in your life. Well, not a person, but a company, a few people out of the investor group that is investing will be in your life for the next at least 10 years. So you might divorce your partner, but that investor will still be in your life. So you need to think very hard. Does it make sense to work with that particular investing firm, or just an angel that you're taking money from? That is also something that should be at the back of your head, realizing. And then investor relationships, this is why I also mentioned that you maybe apply to a few different investors. Initially, they tell you no. because you're not ready, you don't have traction, whatever the reason. But it doesn't mean they don't want to reconsider you. They usually give you the reason, and then you'll continuously build relationship. It because if you get a no, it doesn't mean it's a no. It means that you need to go back to the drawing board, improve, get your metrics a bit better, pivot maybe, and then you come back to the same investors. They remember you. If they don't, deal helps them remember. We have history, and then. You talk to them again, they already know you, they can see how what progress you have made, and building that relationship will bring you to a higher probability of funding because they see that you're trying and things are getting better.
Yeah,
I think it should
very
be everyone's framework how to help founders
true.
because it works.
I agree. And just so everybody knows, there's no financial commitment between Headway and Dealing. There's no commission, but I really want accelerators to use this because when they use this, it helps their startups not only get on board, but now the startups have a tool to continue the work the accelerators just finished, and in order to try and raise that next the amount of funding they need to get, opposed to wandering around trying to find out where can you someone introduce me to an investor. You have a list of investors on here on the platform, and the platform allows you to now start promoting and engaging and working at this, opposed to being left pretty much on your own. And just one other thing to just attest to what Darja said. Yeah, investors do get penalized if they don't invest the money because they get paid a percentage of the funds that have been given to them to invest. And so they make money off that. They get a certain percentage of that to work. And so if they're not working, the investors just sees their money, going nowhere. And some of it dwindling away, paying someone that was supposed to invest. So they're under the gun. They're under the gun, as we use the term we use in the US, which means they're under a lot of pressure to invest this money. They're not just sitting back waiting and not caring. They're under a lot of pressure because they are accountable to somebody else to invest that money. Cubao is an accelerator, um, and they've just recently started doing this at Cubao Innovation Hub. We wanted founders, and I'm just reading some stuff from them. A structured investor journey, a continuous progress tracking, investor visibility, long-term engagement, rather than ending at demo day. And so this has also helped Cubao not only bring in startups. Some startups have applied through the Dealim platform, and as the video showed, there's a funnel there so you can move startups along that funnel, which is a whole lot easier to track. It allows the Cubile team to go in there, meet the startup, find out where stage they're in, provide some headway tools, either the post or the pre-accelerator. If they're not ready for an accelerator, then we tell them here's a post-accelerator program, and then they can headway sometimes uh, recommends different accelerators. If they're not ready for Cubao, Cubao ran and is running an accelerator right now, but Cubao is in a specific sector. It's in the life sciences, digital health sector, and Headway is industry agnostic, so both tech and health. So we just focus primarily on the accelerator, whatever type of accelerator, doing a great job getting the founders prepared. But this is kind of the experience that Cubaos has experienced over the past several months. Now, for you, if you're an accelerator, imagine your accelerator, every founder tracked, prepared, investor ready, and then connected, continuously improving. So if you're an accelerator and you just run through your accelerator program, this platform, Dealim, is very, very suitable and helpful for you to continuously stay in touch with your startups as they are working to get invested. Every investor receives organized opportunities instead of a random pitch deck. This is just so you know, I've worked with three other investor platforms before I came back to Dealim. And 3, 4 years ago, when I first was introduced to Dealim, there were two others that had already approached me. And so I was just comparing them. The other three didn't do well at all, unfortunately. But this is what I really loved about Dealum is the organization of the pitch decks and the information provided to the investors. It's consistent. Whether you're a startup or an accelerator that needs to present these, very, very valuable.
I can attest to that because when I was working for an accelerator for 3 years, I was doing scouting, and we
Mhm.
actually used Delon to facilitate the selection process. And when you do 12 programs, out of which you need to invest into 10 startups at each program, which brings you to 120 startups invested. And then if you remember the acceptance rates of 1%, you can imagine the amount of applications we have received. And the only way to stay sane, it was Delum. And if it's not in Delum, it doesn't exist. And every single comment got recorded. And then when the same startup reapplies to you in 3 years, you can still go back in history and see where you have left off. So the only way to stay sane when you talk to so many startups is to use the platform, and you can definitely do it in your own way. But having something dedicated and built for the workflow of investors is definitely helps. And I'm a
Yes.
little bit, well, I do currently wear both hats. I'm an Delum employee, but I'm also on the side of investors, again using Delum as a platform to facilitate the selection and run the organization. I'm a little bit biased, but at the same time, I keep on getting back to actually using Delum as a tool rather than just building it. I can personally recommend it, and Wes is also doing a good job saying that we have managed to build something that is actually useful, which is always good to hear.
Yes. And we are working on using Dealum much more. And I'll tell you two cool things that I like. And again, I'm not getting paid by Dealum to say this. Um, one is startups that have applied, and they've applied to the cohort, and we find out they're already on Dealum. It's easy for them just to connect to the Qubio or the Headway ecosystem if they're already on Dealum. And the past 3 weeks, I was reached out to by the largest angel network in Texas, and they were looking for startups. And so um, I get I get VCs and angels reaching out to me looking for startups all the time. And so it was interesting. I said, yeah, we have some startups in the life sciences, in the med tech space specifically. They're looking at startups in med tech, digital health, and um, I said, yes. He says, okay, can you have them apply here? And he sent me a Dealum link, and I was like, "Whoa, this is good. This is good for me to see." They probably have 1,000 plus angel investors, but they are Texas wide, and that told me something about what Dealum is actually doing. And for Headway, I like to partner with angel groups and VC groups that are actually, even though Dealum focuses primarily on angel investors, but I like to partner with them, those types of groups, because I know that we are building this ecosystem that's not only growing, but it's a network of angel investors and startups that who have the same goal, which is to try and get these founders invested. And this is it for this particular webinar. It's been excellent again to have you on here, Darja. I think I may have missed a few things on here. Sorry, I'm going to go back to this. So successful accelerators don't wait for demo day, right? They continually build investor trust, educate founders, share progress, celebrate milestones, introduce investors early, which Darja mentioned multiple times, and I that is probably a new tip that I got from you today, Darja, is early. They need to start much earlier, and so I'm going to work that in to some of my strategies with the startups, and then maintain relationships even after graduation. And this is what we're trying to do for the accelerators, but ultimately, the goal is for the startup founders. Well, if
I
you have
think,
any, well, go ahead, please.
yeah, I think for accelerators, if you want to stay in business and actually do it long term, you definitely need to start building relationships with investors, because investors, this is why the gentleman you mentioned who travels 3 out of 4 weeks a month, there are dozens of them. thousands, if not millions of startups, but you're looking for the ones that actually worth your money. And if you are building a good accelerator, you over time start carrying that reputation. The startups you have graduated, they're actually good,
Yeah.
and they will start opening doors to startups, even to investors that you haven't worked with very closely. Those who are in your network with whom you're keeping touch definitely would be very happy to receive leads from you. But if you have done your work and your name starts to carry some weight, that will start opening doors to a lot of startups who graduate your program. Even, let's say, 5 years after they have graduated, you just get a few reports from them, but still it helps a lot. So it's not only startups who need to start building relationships with investors, but also accelerators, and bringing them in and keeping them warm is always important.
Yes. Very good. And thank you for that. Do we have any questions? I can take probably two questions because of the sake of time, maybe three. Anyone have any questions? Okay. Well, you will receive this. I believe my team will email everyone that signed up, whether they made it or not, and then we will be posting this. But you will be able to get access to this webinar and access to my email and Darja's as well. Thank you guys all for joining us. Thank you, Darja. As I mentioned, tomorrow, Darja and I will record a podcast, so that podcast will not be live, but we'll get it out to you probably in the next 2 weeks or so.
I look forward getting deeper into the conversation,
Yeah.
because I think podcasts are much more chatty, and
Yes.
you get more out of it.
Yes, you do.
But it was a pleasure being here. I hope what we do actually helps startups and accelerators. If you're an accelerator, and just reach out to us, we're happy to talk. We also look for feedback from those who are using us, and we're constantly improving based on the feedback that we receive from our customers, but also what's happening within the ecosystem and the world in general. And I really look forward to the podcast, and thank you again for inviting me and trusting me to
Sure.
talk to your network.
Thank you very much, Darja. And thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Very much appreciated. And see everyone soon. Bye bye.
Bye.